So the issue we're going to debate today is affirmative action on the nationwide level. So affirmative action, in the context of education and employment, is the practice or policy of favoring individuals belonging to groups known to have been discriminated against previously. Our solution to prevent this racial discrimination is to implement California's Proposition 209 nationwide. This proposition is also called the California Civil Rights Initiative, after the Civil Rights Act, which states that the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. Prop 209 was placed on the ballot in California in 1996, where it was approved. Currently, Prop 209 is implemented only in California. However, 7 other states have also banned affirmative action. These states include Washington, Michigan, Nebraska, Arizona, Oklahoma, Florida, and New Hampshire. So as the affirmative side, we are stating that Prop 209 has been successful in California, specifically in the cases of college admissions. Therefore, it should be adopted by the rest of the United States. So affirmative action aims to create diversity, but under unfair and biased circumstances. So according to Duke University, in an article titled "The Effects of Prop 209 on College Enrollment and Graduation Rates in California," affirmative action in admissions leads to underrepresented minorities being admitted to colleges with entering credentials that are lower than their non-minority counterparts. So this creates standards that people of different races aren't being held to the same standards. So Gail Harriet, in an article titled "The Sad Irony of Affirmative Action," she analyzes specifically the University of Texas, that entering class of 2009. So she found that the mean SAT scores and mean high school GPA for Asians was 1991 and a 3.07, whites was a 1914 and a 3.04, Hispanics at 1794 and a 2.83, and African Americans at 15.24 and a 2.57. So if affirmative action is all for creating equal opportunity for all types of races to be enrolled into universities, then they should be held to the same standards. So affirmative action also acknowledges that minorities are at a disadvantage. So if affirmative action is granted to minorities because it is viewed as a disadvantage to be from certain lines of that ancestry, then it seems to acknowledge that the racial inferiority of those recipients. So affirmative action in all ways, shapes, and forms seems to promote anything but racial equality. If a government deems that someone is worthy of these handouts based on their racial composition, then they are not considered equal to their counterparts. In the case of University of California versus Bakke, Alan Bakke, a 35-year-old white man, applied to the University of California Medical School at Davis. He was rejected both times. This is because the school reserved 16 places in each entering class of 100 qualified minorities as part of the university's affirmative action program to get more minorities and to increase diversity in schools. So his qualifications, his GPA, and his test scores exceeded those of any minority students admitted in the 2 years his applications were rejected. He contended first in the California courts, then in the Supreme Court, in that he was excluded from admission solely on the basis of his race. So in an article titled "Affirmative Action in California" by ballotpedia.org, they say, affirmative action admissions programs were undertaken by public universities in the 1960s. Some universities initially established quotas in order to achieve a diverse student body. So in the case of University of California versus Bakke, they had a quota of 16 spots that they needed to fill that Alan Bakke was qualified for, but he wasn't admitted because he was white and they needed to fill the 16 places to increase diversity. So my next claim is that affirmative action does not aid in graduation rates, because in virtually all selective schools where racial preferences in admission are practiced, the majority of African American students end up in the lower quarter of their class. Lower grades sap their academic self-confidence, that their counterparts who are admitted based on merit enjoy school in part because they perceive that they're good at it. So in an article titled The Sad Irony of Affirmative Action by Gail Harriet, it states that among African American students with GPAs at or near 2.6, only about 4% of them wanted to become college professors. Among those with GPAs at or near 4.0, however, the number was over 20%. So affirmative action, that helps the point that affirmative action decreases the interest in school and graduation rates. Another negative of affirmative action is that students are starting to conceal their identity for better odds and chances to get into school. So in an article titled The Rise and Fall of Affirmative Action, he states that students whose families were mixed Asian and white who identified themselves as white on their applications, lest they be lumped in with all the other applicants. So the Princeton Review, on the article they also state that the Princeton Review in the past has encouraged students of Asian descent to try and conceal their cultural identity. So affirmative action is all about equal opportunity for students, but in fact it's under biased circumstances where students aren't fairly competing at the same level as their counterparts.